They now have a suspect who they say lived with Gus but isn't either of his parents.
Police reassuring the public that although this is a complex investigation made even more difficult by this vast and remote landscape, they won't stop until they find answers.
One thing that is clearly idiosyncratic about Oak Park Station are these mine shafts. How many have we seen now? How many have been uncovered? And this is the latest one that's been uncovered at this adjacent property.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't breathe. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Police revealing they'll begin a fresh outback search for the little boy tomorrow, with a focus this time on 6 abandoned mine shafts. Keziah Sullivan is there at Yunta in the state's mid-north. Keziah, what's prompted this new operation?
Well, Brenton, police say they've only recently become aware that the 6 mine shafts existed on the remote property, which is where Gus's family lived. Now,
that is a report from late November last year, 2 months after Gus vanished. I found it more than a little hinky that the cops only did a thorough search of the mine shafts 2 months later, and they seem to need outside experts to tell them that these shafts existed, 6 of them, and where they were. Really? Josie and Shannon couldn't have told them that on day one? Surely they must know where all the mine shafts are, because to not know risks sheep falling in them and dying. You know, something that no doubt has already happened over the years. So why is it that the family didn't inform the investigators of these mine shafts? And is that a part of this whole thing about inconsistencies and discrepancies in their statements? Now, while some of these mine shafts appear to be obvious holes in the ground, what if there is a mine shaft we don't know about that's been covered over and filled up? In the Patrick Frazee case, he literally made a pyre on his driveway, a big fire, and he burned remains to powder, and then he covered the driveway with a layer of dirt. Basically, that was a case of hiding remains in plain sight. And if you think about the sadism involved in that, one is literally driving over those remains each day. That was his fiancée and the mother of his child once upon a time. I'm not even going to tell you how Frazee murdered her. But basically what happened there was he turned a person's body into powder that was in a way indistinguishable from dust. But if you take that idea and you apply it here, where you cover something over with dirt on a property where there's dirt stretching for miles, this is where a property owner, a farmer in this case, really would have a unique advantage over people unfamiliar with that property, people coming from other places that haven't lived and worked and spent every single day on that property. And so, especially if it's an old mine shaft that hasn't been documented, that only the original owners know about. And so the question is there something like that? And would ground penetrating radar be able to pick that up? It would also be a relatively simple matter to hide away one of these old mine shafts, meaning you place the remains inside or drop the remains inside, fill that shaft with rocks or sand, then cover the opening with a board or canvas, and then cover that with topsoil. But that would still indicate some sort of lingering disturbance, that the ground that's got to go in there to fill it up has got to come from somewhere. And we saw even months later in the grave of J.J. Vallow on Chad Daybell's property, we saw lingering disturbances in the soil. That's what they need to be looking out for here. If we look at this information from Google, JJ's gravesite was located in a specifically designated area referred to as the Pet Cemetery on the 3 to 4 acre property. Is there a specifically designated area that makes sense on this particular property in South Australia? In terms of the condition of the burial, JJ was found wrapped in black plastic garbage bags with a white plastic bag over his head and his arms bound in front of him with duct tape. He was buried in a shallow grave under a layer of dirt, rocks and wood planks. The area was described as a pet cemetery near a pond featuring trees, and there you have it, disturbed ground. Forensic investigators, including an FBI evidence response team, spent days meticulously excavating the site. But the key giveaway here is disturbed ground. Now, this scenario of a burial deep underground would also potentially be out of reach of the faculties of a cadaver dog. The bottom line here, though, is this notion of a child being buried in already made holes in the ground, very deep holes. In the Laurie Vallow case, we saw one of the children buried in or near a pet cemetery. But with Suzanne Morphew, she was buried in an area sometimes referred to as the boneyard, where other bodies had been previously dumped, in the hopes that if and when her remains were eventually uncovered or exposed, they would be in plain sight but theoretically anonymous. One set of bones amongst many sets of bones. In fact, it was while looking for someone else's remains, Edna Quintana, that investigators literally stumbled on Suzanne's remains. According to CBS, forensic experts indicated that Suzanne's remains had been moved at least twice, meaning she did not die where she was found. Well, could a similar psychology have been used here? A burial in a local cemetery or a place where animal bones are typically buried. Where are the sheep carcasses at Oak Park Station typically disposed of? If Gus's remains were also moved, then evidence could have been transferred to a vehicle, and those vehicles ought to be subjected to cadaver dog searches as well. And this is the number 9 clue we all missed. Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.